Book discussion, Maud Dixon by Alexandra Andrews. I discuss books on this podcast series for two reasons. One is I think it's important to keep a record of my thoughts and what I was thinking about books that I read. And second, also, the purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. And I've said several times on this podcast that reading is the conditioning of the mind, and the hedge fund business is the knowledge business. So reading is really kind of what we do in the hedge fund business, and the equivalent of a martial artist doing conditioning training. So it's incredibly important. I think it's useful to discuss these books and have thoughts put in words and have a record of also what was I thinking, and also see how it changes. How do these thoughts change over time? Because sometimes they might, sometimes they might not. This is not even on podcast. It's August 14th, 2021. This is Krim Delco. Since the last update, the fund is down 1.9%. The market is roughly flat. We are up 8.9% for the year. The market's up 18.95%. We're underperforming by 10.05%. Who is Maud Dixon by Alexandra Andrews? Let me first give the big picture overview. It's a great book. It has Hollywood written all over it, so it's a very capturing story. It's sort of like Gone Girl, kind of realm of deception, murder, things like that. In those spheres, I would put it there, and I could totally see how this book will be turned into a movie at some point. Now, I don't want to talk about the plot. I don't give away the plot. I don't want to give away anything that would deter somebody from reading the book. It's a tense book. You want to read it. It's almost a page turner from that perspective. But what I want to discuss here is more sort of the depth of the characters and what they mean to me. So this is, the protagonist is, in my view, a loser in many ways, portrayed as a loser, plays a loser, thinks of herself as a loser. And then there's another actor in the book, another person, another character, and that character is a little bit scary, but that is, I would say, the genius character, in a sense, the opposite of the loser, and the loser character wants to become that person. So this book is a lot about, I want to become what I'm not. I want to become what I cannot achieve. And I think one of the fundamental threads of this book, as far as I'm concerned, it's almost a Nietzsche-esque portray of the genius that requires evil. It requires, now, there's a line in the book where one of the protagonists, the genius protagonist, tells the loser protagonist that if you want to become a great writer, if you want to become a real red celebrity writer, you have to have a story, and it has to be your own story. Now, she's not necessarily saying you have to be evil or anything like that, but the way this book is written, and the story of this book kind of implies that the stories that these ladies are dealing with, and both of them are aspiring writers. One of them has made it as a writer, the other is trying to make it as a writer, and there is evil involved in those stories. So you have to be evil, you have to be cutthroat, and really go to the extreme, and no half measures, no half measures. This is a line that gets repeated in the book several times. So no half measures, which can have a good connotation or a bad connotation. And in this case, it's certainly a bad connotation, because it really takes the characters to the extreme. They go all the way. There's murder involved. There's just cutthroat acting in any which way, not just murder, but also like no respect for personality, no respect for individual safety or any of that stuff. So I think the key thread in this book is how this one character a loser again in many ways, portrayed as a loser, grew up in a nondescript town somewhere in the U.S. and then goes to New York and is exposed to whatever New York has to offer, and then all this inferiority complexes start kicking in with I'm not like them, and these rich people and successful people, and there's a character, of course, like always in any New York story, from the Upper East Side with the perfect pedigree and the Ivy League schools and the private school and this and that, and all of that stuff gets sort of boiled down into a frustration, into a reaction also by that character to try to go all the way. Now, this protagonist, the loser character, in my view, I am not sympathizing with that character. I'm not sympathizing. So, and I'm not sure if Alexandra Andrews did a good job there. There's a few flaws in the story, a few, I would say, that's why it also has Hollywood written all over it. It's a little bit too simple. You don't trust this particular protagonist who is portrayed as a loser and a little bit dumb and a little bit, yeah, it's just dumb, just not very smart to then pull off certain things that she pulls off in the book. You just don't, yeah, it just doesn't add up. So there I would say the author has let us down a bit. I think Andrews has really come up with a great story here. It's an awesome plot. I think the execution is, like I said, a bit flawed. Like, you can't have a loser character that is just not very good at what she does, all of a sudden turning into this genius executor, this enforcer of her own will, or if you want. But then probably Andrews could say, look, it's fine. This is maybe the person that she was. But when she kind of turns into this evil monster, well, then she becomes this perfect executor. So it takes this evil monster to execute. And she, before that, was just human. And humans have limits. Humans have this thing that humans have, which is they don't go all the way. They do half measures. They want to please. They want to be in harmony with people. And there's actually, now that I'm thinking, maybe that's what Andrews really is trying to say. And actually, she's right about that, because in the end of the book, the loser protagonist, which by the end of the book, let me say that, is not just such a loser anymore. All of a sudden, that's why I said there's a bit of a this doesn't add up. But she says that it's dangerous to be alone, but it's necessary. It's necessary to be alone in order to succeed in life, in order to reach those levels of success, which is freedom and total artistic freedom and total artistic ability to please people, to capture people's attention. You know, it's not just to be a famous artist, or you're represented by a famous agent, and you're represented by this, and you have sell books. You have to capture people's attention. People actually have to spend time with you. That is not easy. And in order to achieve that, you have to be cutthroat, no half measures. So in that context, I think she might have a point here, the author, saying, okay, I gave you a loser here. I gave you a person that doesn't deserve any success, that even annoys the reader by, like, oh gosh, can this person just be removed? I mean, this is almost painful. You know, this wannabe writer star, this wannabe something, annoying, particularly for having lived in New York myself. New York's full of people like that, the wannabes that don't actually do the work. You know, it's one thing to be aspiring, let's say, to be an author or something like that. It's the other thing to actually do it, and it takes the work. And what this book shows is that if you actually do the work, and the work sometimes is dirty, you really have to dig in deep, go through the shit, excuse my French, and then you might get on the other end, you might actually get something that resembles a story, and then you can write that down or live that story if you're not a writer. that's kind of the way I see it. It's a fascinating book. It, I think, just puts down. I don't want to go too far here and make the arch now to our business and the principle stack that we have, but I just want to mention one thing. In our principle stack, we have one of the books that we use in our principle stack is 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, and that's, I think, probably one of the most important, if not the most important, business books written in the last 20 years. If I think, and by the way, the other books that we have in the principle stack, according to at least to our estimation, are also the most important business books. So, for example, the Innovation Stack by Jim McKelvey, and then The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Richardson, and then also we have David Deutsch's The Beginning of Infinity, which is certainly more than just a business book. Not that the business book is not good enough or anything, but I would say The Beginning of Infinity is a philosophy tome, so it's more than that. It's about epistemology, it's about physics and things like that. But those are very important books, and we have Peter Thiel in there, and Peter Thiel talks about this uniqueness. And it sounds easy. If I tell my 14-year-old son you have to be unique, he kind of looks at me and say, well, what the hell does that mean? And maybe, Alexandra Andrews in this book, and Nietzsche, of course, in his books, give you a little bit more detail what that actually means. To be unique can have a very dark side, because it means you're almost inhuman. Nietzsche said it's the Uberman, the Übermensch. Now he used Uber mensch you can almost say, okay, it's kind of a positive thing. You're just better than an average human. It's fine. You take that step. You take that particular big step into something unexplored. But you can also look at it from Angela Andrews' point of view. You just once you decide not to take half measures in life can become pretty ugly, because maybe half measures are necessary for us to stay human, to stay within the confines of the law, to stay within the confines of society. And if we cut that cord, if we go and say no more half measures, well, it could turn ugly. Now, running a hedge fund requires you to do that too. You need to be unique, because, like I said many times, we generate wealth by associating ourselves with people that are wealth generators, and those wealth generators are the creatives. Those are the people that, like in this book, are those geniuses, those extreme people that don't take half measures. And they are, at some point, almost evil, even if they do good things. People like Elon Musk, people like Jennifer Doudna, etc., etc. These people that are incredible creators, incredibly creative people, all that stuff. But in order to really push it, to change society, to drive forward wealth generation for themselves and the rest of society, they almost have to be a little bit, they have to have that little sliver of uncomfortableness. And that's why we're scared of change. We're scared of people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, because they are those types of people. And it explains why we're scared of them. It explains why people hate change, particularly technological change driven by disruption. Now, maybe I'm going a bit too far here, but I just want to I wanted to make that connection, because like I do many times in this podcast, I think on the fly. I think while I talk, and this is one of those thoughts that just came up to me, and I think it's a good thought. I think it's a thought that is worth putting down, that we have this concept of uniqueness, of the Peter Thiel, let's say, view of the world, where you, in order to be a wealth generator, you just have to be really very, very different. And these types of people, let's say in Angela Andrews' book, there is the protagonist, the genius protagonist, that certainly is that kind of, that person would be funded by, she definitely would be funded by venture capitalists. And the loser protagonist is the kind of player that will never be funded, but then she turns evil, and all of a sudden I think she will be funded too. Now, to summarize, before I summarize, I just want to say I don't think you need to do evil. I don't think Elon Musk is doing evil. I just think that people have that connotation with uniqueness, and that it requires some an uber-human behavior, and that scares people, and that's fine. Summarize, Maud Dixon. Who is Maud Dixon? A great novel. I recommend it. Well written and interesting and capturing. There's a certain flaws in the story that are okay, but it's not a tome that, like many novels, it lets certain doors open, it leaves certain doors open, it leaves certain corners unchecked and things like that, but that's fine. That also gives you a bit freedom to interpret, and that's great. And I think it's about the desire to be something greater than you are, and the necessity, what it takes to actually get there. And in this book, it's particularly ugly, but it's still an interesting story in the sense that you can then ask yourself, okay, am I willing to take that step? Am I willing to take the ugly step? Of course, it has to be in the confines of the law, and in this book, it's not. But you can take this as a symbol and just ask yourself, am I willing to take that very ugly step to go from being a human, a sort of half-measured type normal human, to the extreme, to the fullest extreme? Thank you.